Purdue plays through their bigs, and Oscar Clough has a really big night for Purdue. Find out why it was a great game plan and why Purdue beat Marquette the way they did on today's Locked On Boilermakers.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into an episode of Locked On Boilermakers live from Mackey Arena after Purdue beats Marquette 79-59. It was certainly a fun one. A lot goes down, but ultimately Purdue is able to come out with a victory, and that's what we're going to talk about on today's live post-game show. Locked On Boilermaker post-game show for the first time at Mackey Arena. So it was certainly a fun game, and from the jump, you could tell that that level of intensity was going to be there. Anytime a Matt Painter team and a Shaka Smart team come to play on the same court, you can expect that level of intensity that we saw tonight, and we certainly did see that level of intensity, and it started early with Trey Kaufman-Renn and with Oscar Clough on those boards. That was what was really big for Purdue in this game, was their ability to play inside, play with those bigs, and then score that way, rebound that way, take advantage of the glass, take advantage of points inside the paint. That's what Purdue did tonight, and that's why they came away with a 20-point victory at home. And if you go back to that Minnesota game where, against Minnesota in that first half, you're only up by 3, but the second half of that game looked like a whole different dynamic in terms of what this Purdue team can be this year. And I feel like early on tonight against Marquette, there wasn't a situation where Purdue tried to do anything different. They play with their bigs early, they play with their bigs often, and then eventually it came out with Purdue getting a 20-point win. If you look at the stat sheet tonight, the one that's going to pop out is Oscar Clough's numbers 100%. He had one of the best games, if not the best game, that he's had in his college basketball career, not just at Purdue. And that was really kind of why Purdue won this game, was because of those bigs, was because of Oscar Clough, who shot the ball 9 for 9 tonight, 22 points. He had 10 rebounds, a double-double at home for Oscar Clough. And we talk about on the show all the time how Oscar Clough is actually the most efficient basketball player in college basketball right now, regardless of position, regardless of being a big, being a guard. Oscar Clough consistently gets it done for the Purdue Boilermakers, and I feel like we need to start seeing more of that. Not that Purdue's been doing anything wrong by the way that they've been using Oscar Clough, but when he puts up a night like he did tonight, when he goes 9 for 9, 100% from field goal range, and also puts up that double-double with the rebounding numbers, you start to think, well, what can we do with Oscar Clough this year? Where can we put him in order to find the max amount of success? Because I do think that Purdue is going to find a ton of success with Oscar Clough in the lineup. That's just naturally his role. That's what we knew he was going to be when he came over from South Dakota State. But now he's really starting to take that jump into the player that Matt Painter expected him to be, that a lot of people hoped he would become. I think that we saw that version of Oscar Clough in this game against Marquette. So outside of the bigs, Trey Kaufman-Renn also had a decent game. Wasn't as efficient from the field goal range as Oscar Clough was, shot 3 for 7, but still comes out with 10 points, 9 rebounds, a near double-double in this game for Trey Kaufman-Renn. So the front court was absolutely on fire in this game, and that is why Marquette gets themselves in the situation they do. And before we talk anything more about Marquette, I think it's important to say that although we know what Marquette is, they beat us last year by a significant amount. This year, I'm not doubting Shaka Smart, but it's just not the same team that they have had in previous years, because Shaka Smart has been a little bit reluctant to try that transfer portal, to go after guys that route. And we see they have some talented guards this year, but they don't really have the firepower to compete with the Purdue, especially not at Mackey Arena today. And that's ultimately the outcome that Marquette has. They only get production from 6 guys in this game, and their biggest production was off of the bench. Royce Parnham comes off the bench and plays 27 minutes for Marquette, puts up 19 points on 7 for 15 shooting. But if you look at their starting lineup, the guys that we previewed in that pregame show, talking about Chase Ross, talking about Nigel James Jr., Chase Ross had 10 points, but what did Nigel James Jr. do in this game. He was 0 for 6, 0 points in 20 minutes. That really hurts Marquette. Their lack of firepower in that offense where they're explosive and just can change games. I don't feel like they really have that this year under Shaka Smart. And we kind of see that early where Purdue is struggling. And if Marquette had any chance to get in this game, it was going to happen early before Purdue got into their flow. And while Purdue, they were still operating on the glass, they weren't shooting the three ball well at all. But on the other end, when Marquette's not able to shoot the three ball, it gets you out of games. You can't win games when you're not able to compete, and especially when you're trying to play at Mackey Arena against a Purdue team the way that we saw them play tonight. And I honestly do believe that this may have been the best defensive performance that we've seen from Purdue at home all season long. We saw a great performance against Texas Tech. We saw Purdue being able to limit LeBaron Philon on the road at Alabama. But in terms of games played at home at Mackey Arena, it's single degrees outside. It's frigid. There's snow outside. It was tough for people to get here, but there was still a really good crowd at Mackey today. Raucous, loud, and I feel like it fueled Purdue to a win in this game. Always involved, and of course, the crowd at Mackey is always a factor, but even more so considering all the environments that was going on today. But definitely leave your comments. Let me know what you thought about this Purdue victory. I thought it was a very finished in game. We talk about how Purdue, sometimes this year, they have had a habit of going into games and sleepwalking, playing down to teams that maybe aren't up to their level in terms of being that ranked team, being that team with a whole lot of expectations. I don't think that Marquette is that team this year, yet Purdue still comes in. They manage the boards early. They get it done inside with their big men. And that's why we're sitting here. Purdue wins this game by 20. They cover the spread set by our friends at FanDuel. And I feel like you have to be happy if you're a Purdue fan with how this team played in this game. This is one of the few performances that I look back to this year. I mean, you can nitpick the turnover issues early. Braden Smith, he turns the ball over 3 times to start out this game. But outside of that turnover margin that has consistently kind of been an issue this year, I thought that everything was good for Purdue in this game. I think that they showed what it is to play as the number 6 team in the nation. This looked like a top 5 team. And there have been games this year at Mackey where I come out of this saying, I don't know if Purdue is a top 5 team right now. They kind of sleepwalked in the first half. They didn't play a complete game of basketball. You can't say that about Purdue tonight. You can't say that about the way they played. And honestly, the score, 20 points at the end of this game, 79-59, that's closer than how this game actually was. There are a lot of late-minute baskets in terms of Marquette. Purdue put a lot of that end of the bench out for the last 5 to 7 minutes of that game, and Marquette made a couple shots. So 20-point victory, but it honestly should have been more. Let's take a look at some of the guys who produced for Purdue tonight. We already talked about some of the Marquette Eagles who just didn't show up. They don't have enough depth to have that number 1 guy right now. They just don't have it. Chase Ross, he's talented, but without those supporting pieces, it's going to be tough for this Marquette team to compete. And that's something that Purdue identified and they diagnosed early, especially with Fletcher Loyer from 3. He was pretty dang good in this game, had 15 points, leading scorer for Purdue right now, 5 for 9 from the field, 4 for 8 from 3. He really changed this game early on. When Purdue was struggling from 3, he makes a couple of them where you go, if Fletcher Loyer's able to make this 3 ball, well, then anything can happen. Purdue can control this game, and they can end up winning the game. And I feel like that's kind of what Fletcher Loyer provides you in that starting lineup, is that 3-point shot. There are times where it just comes off his hand. There was one in the corner in the second half where Fletcher Loyer shot it, and it was money. You could tell all the way through that Fletcher was going to bang down that shot, and it really is a momentum changer when Fletcher Loyer is on his game. He was on his game tonight, made those threes, has 15 points to show for it, and he's a big factor as to why Purdue comes out with a victory tonight. We talked about Trey Kaufman-Renn, who has 10 points and 9 rebounds. He kind of played with Oscar Clough. He let Oscar Clough do his thing. What Clough wanted, he got, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, he kind of stood out of the way, got his rebounds, and let Clough cook. And that's what you got to do in that front court. And I feel like we talk all the time about Oscar Clough and Trey Kaufman-Renn, kind of that relationship in the front court, and how Oscar Clough, since he's gotten brought over in that transfer portal, Trey Kaufman-Renn has really jumped as a rebounder. And we saw that at times in this game when Oscar Clough had so much gravity because he's the type of player that he is. He was playing at the level he was playing at tonight. it gave Trey Kaufman-Renn opportunities to get those offensive rebounds early, and that really kind of cemented the tone. And ultimately, coming out of this game, I think that the biggest takeaway that we can take away from this game is that if Purdue is able to consistently play through those bigs, I don't know who else beats them. Yes, we saw that Iowa State came in here last weekend and beat Purdue pretty soundly, but I don't feel like Purdue played the way that they did tonight. And I'm not saying that Marquette is by any means on the level of Iowa State, but what I am saying is that I feel like Purdue may have identified a different strategy for how they want to run this offense in terms of getting it done with your bigs, passing it down low, and then letting Clough get it done. And if he can't get it done, then you know Trey Kaufman-Renn is right there to clean it up. That's what we saw. If we look at the points in the paint's numbers, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure that it was quite the difference. Yeah, I got it 22-36. Purdue beats Marquette by 14 points in terms of points in the paint. I mean, that's the difference. In a 20-point game, when you're able to score 14 more points inside of that paint with your bigs, that changes games. And it just changes the dynamic of how this game is going to flow, the momentum on both sides when you're able to get those extra opportunities. And even early on, Trey Kaufman-Renn, he got an offensive rebound and calls a timeout. And in the moment, you say 1 minute into the game, it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, in my opinion, for Trey Kaufman-Renn to call a timeout there. But when you look at how it worked out, his ability to just retain that possession, even if maybe it wasn't the smartest timeout in that situation, it still works out for Purdue because they have such an efficient offense. And we see it. We talk about that turnover margin quite a lot on the show, and I think we're going to continue talking about it until Purdue can either start to get some steals or limit those turnovers. But the thing I want to mention about that is that the turnover to assist ratio, that's not the issue because Purdue's efficiency is so high. Braden Smith gets all those assists, rarely turns the ball over, had a few tonight, but not as bad as he was worse tonight than he usually is turning the ball over. But Purdue, with that efficiency, as long as you don't turn the ball over, yes, you want to start forcing those turnovers. And that's going to be something that if you want to make that March run like a lot of people expect for you this year, forcing turnovers is going to be a big part on where this team goes. But if you're just able to limit those turnovers in the first half that we saw, and Braden Smith able to get those assist numbers where he's consistently at 8+ a game, you're going to be a tough team to beat. And that's what we've seen so far for Purdue this year. This efficiency and the efficiency we saw tonight, it was just too good for this Marquette team to overcome, especially when Purdue is playing defense the way that they played tonight. And I've called them out about this. This has been the one thing for Purdue that I've said. If you look at the KenPom numbers, Purdue by far the number one efficiency, but on the defensive side of the ball, kind of in the 30s. They're not the best defensive team, but I felt like tonight flying all over the place. Oscar Clough against a talented center that Marquette has. He was able to get his hands up where you don't think of Clough as that traditional rim protector, but at a lot of times in this game, he really did a good job of protecting that rim, not letting Marquette get to it. And that prevents Marquette, that forces them to shoot that three-point shot that they weren't having at all in this game. And that's why they're able to stall out. That's why you're able to force Marquette into a 26% from three-point range because they're not able to get inside. When you make a team one-dimensional like that, you typically find a good amount of success, and it really helps when the Boilermakers were flying tonight. All the guards were all over the place. Lawyer, Smith, playing really good defense. And you don't think of those guys as primary defenders, but like I said, just flying around tonight. That's why Purdue comes out of here with a 20-point win. Before we get out of here, the snow's coming down at Mackey, so I got to make sure that my car's not completely covered. We're going to talk about a couple things to end out the show. A few final notes from me from Mackey Arena in the first ever live Locked On Boilermakers postgame show from Mackey Arena. In terms of the way that Purdue played tonight, in terms of the bench numbers, so I thought that the bench was pretty good, and they were able to get a lot of guys out towards the end of that game. Jakari Harris played a decent game, 2 for 4, 4 points, but he wasn't really trying to force anything offensively. Jack Benner has 5 points. Great game from him in just 12 minutes. Meyer had 7 points, missed a couple that makes a crazy step back 3. Jacobson has 4, but you don't really need him because of the way that Clough was playing in this game. When your depth is able to shine the way that it did tonight against Marquette, and once again, Marquette does not have the depth that they've had in previous years, but still, when you're able to show up with that depth, when you have guys that are capable of coming off the bench, the way that Amaya is, the way that Jakari Harris has continuously grown more confidence doing, the way that Daniel Jacobson is able to do, it gives you so much success. And it's a huge luxury because say Oscar Clough doesn't play the way that he does tonight. Well, the last time I was in Mackey Arena, Jacobson makes like 12 shots in a row. So if Clough doesn't hurt you, then Jacobson hurts you. Or for example, if CJ Cox isn't having a great night, it gives you the opportunity for Jakari Harris to come off that bench and really find a lot of success. That's somewhere else where Purdue shined in this game tonight. Just looking at the numbers, the turnover margin, Purdue once again loses the turnover margin 14-12. That's something we're going to continue to talk about, to hope that Purdue ends up getting better there. It's not an issue right now because the points off turnovers is only a 4-point difference. But against Iowa State, we saw how quickly that got out of hand when the Cyclones were able to force turnovers at a really, really high rate against Purdue. So something you want to look at, something you want to limit, and something you're a tad bit concerned coming out of this game against a Marquette team. But if that's the only thing, you've got to be happy with it. I think we already talked about the rebound numbers, but at 38-29, you have a ton of success. And then on the offensive boards, actually, Marquette gets you beat. On the defensive side, you completely flip it, out-rebound them by 12. In terms of field goal percentage in this game, Purdue has 54% from the field. Marquette has 33%. And that's what I keep coming back to, that field goal percentage. This is the first game where I come out of it, and of course I'm at Mackey, so it feels a little bit different, but it's one of the first games that I come out of, and I just feel like Purdue and their defense really showed what a national championship team can be. And I feel like tonight, and yes, it's against Marquette. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. It is against Marquette, but the way that Purdue's defense played today gives me hope that they're going to be able to develop into that top 20 defense that we preach about, that we hope that Purdue turns into come March time, because you really do want them to make a run. And this is the team that showed off that they're extremely capable of that. Whether Marquette ends up being a March team, they're going to have a lot of ground to make up in the Big East. But I by no means think that Marquette is the worst team that we played this year. I by no means think that Marquette is necessarily a bad team. They're not as good as they have been in the past, but they're still capable of winning games in the Big East. They're still capable of making a run. And I think that the fact that Purdue dominated them on both sides of the ball, the way that they did in this game, really shows a lot about where Purdue is right now, December 13th, and where they can hopefully go into conference play. And that's kind of what's next on the schedule. So this Saturday game's out of the way now. It's a big win for Purdue, bouncing back at Mackey after what happened last Saturday. And now the rest of the way out this month, you got Auburn next Saturday. That one's not going to be here, but it'll be just about an hour down the road in Indianapolis. You also have Kent State on December the 29th to end out the new year. Those are two games where if you're able to win those games, and by no means is Kent State a bad team. They're a very good mid-major. You know what Auburn is. They can be anybody, any day. We don't really know what that team's going to be. But if you're able to continue this momentum, play the defense that you played tonight, and let it lead to your offense, let that flow through your bigs, I think that Purdue has an extremely, extremely high chance to carry this momentum into the next couple games in December to end out 2025 2-0. This is their 10th win tonight. End out 2025 12-1. And then you have to love where you're sitting. If you're a Purdue fan, if you're Matt Painter, if you're this program going into conference play in 2026, January 3rd against Wisconsin, that's going to be a huge game. And we're going to talk about that one, I'm sure, in depth on this show. But if you're able to win these next two games, they're extremely important for where you want to be as a Purdue fan going into 2026, because we're talking about top 5 team. And I don't know, we'll have to see how the games play out today. There's still an opportunity for Purdue to jump into that top 5 on Monday with 2 wins this week. But I'm thinking if they beat Auburn, if they beat Kent State going into 2026, there's no doubt in my mind that this Purdue Boilermaker team is going to be fighting all through conference play for that 1 seed in March. They're going to be fighting for a top 5 seed going into 2026. And the ceiling for this team just got a lot higher. But it all comes down to that defense. Was really impressed with the way that they played tonight. Was extremely proud of the fact that Purdue was able to limit Marquette to just 59 points. If that's a sign of things to come, well, Purdue fans are in for a treat. We got the offense down. The defense may be back. Osterkloff has a huge game. Of course, he has a double-double in this one, shoots 9 for 9 from the field. Can't speak highly enough about the way that Osterkloff played today. And that's going to be the storyline coming out of this game, is the way that Osterkloff was able to play. 22 points in a double-double. Purdue gets out of Mackey Arena with a 79-59 victory. I hope you guys all enjoyed the first ever live post-game show from Mackey Arena. It was really a special experience today. Glad to see the Boilermakers beat Marquette in person. A great game, and I will see you guys right back here on Monday for some more Locked On Boilermakers. Make sure you jump on the show. It's Monday through Friday. If you guys are new here, just now seeing the live stream, so of course, join us in the week. It's going to be fun. We always have the best Boilermaker content we can bring. But with that, I'm all done here from Nick Harvin at Mackey Arena. As always, boiler up, hammer down.